Welcome, everyone, to the Politics of Survival. I'm your host, Tara Reade, and I have a very special guest whom I really enjoy. I've been on his show, and I follow his work and share it quite often, so you'll recognize the name Niko House. Niko, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Ty. I appreciate it.
I wanted to give a shout out to Warren, who has and Reef. Do you have his links, his link tree, or Uncle Warren's? Okay, and the name of his podcast, please, Extra Bulla, up there. Could I want to dedicate tonight's podcast to Direct Aid. He's a fellow content creator who's really funny and wonderful, and he's going through some tough times right now, and as many of us are. And if you have tips, if you have whatever, could you throw it to Uncle Warren, please? So his link tree will be up there through. Now, Niko, I wanted to talk to you because I was on your show and you kind of were able to tell everybody who I was, but I wanted to hear more about how you came to be in this space. You talked a little bit about watching YouTubers, really kind of blow up and succeed, but your content's really amazing. It's really informative, but it's also positive in a world that's, got a lot of negative things happening. So I appreciate you in our space. And I guess, what was your trajectory and how did you get to where you are now?
Whew, that's a crazy story.
Okay.
Honestly, it's like,
okay.
So I was at University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and then I ended up starting like the largest Bernie Sanders organization in the country at the time in 2016. And it was wild. It was a wild ride. And because like we were so plugged in and everybody was in contact with us constantly, we, long story short, I figured out that Bernie was being cheated, and I was the first one to go public with it.
Wow.
It turned out to be more true than I had expected it to be, because whenever I first actually did the call to action, it was supposed to be for North Carolina. I didn't know that other people were going to see the video around the country. And so staffers and volunteers literally started like blowing my DMs up. And I was actually on spring break at the time, drinking a mojito on the beach. Whenever
that's my favorite drink, mojitos. Yeah. I drink the virgin mojito, though I don't have alcohol in it, but I love mojitos.
Yeah,
and
I mean,
when they're done right. So you're having a mojito on the beach on spring break.
Yeah,
and then what happened?
I was going through my DMs, and I kind of knew, like, yo, if I respond to these DMs, I don't think my life is ever going to be the same again. And I had to like take a second to like mentally prepare for it, because I just was not. I'm like, I don't know what I'm in the middle of right now. But this shit, I'm talking about like it was like 150 or 200 DMs within like a 3-hour period. Yeah, and so I mean, I got politicians reaching out to me, other candidates who are also running for office, like Tim Canova and like everybody, and I'm like. Okay, well, I just chugged the rest of my mojito and I started responding to people. Right. And through that process, I actually, because I was already in Miami for spring break, because my brother lived out here, and Jared and Elizabeth Lee Beck contacted me via one of their friends. And that's how we started the DNC fraud lawsuit. We were doing research into how we could actually hold the DNC accountable, because they had always been able to escape accountability by saying, oh, we're just a party. And I found out that they actually were, a registered organization, being a 501c4, and that like the number one way that 501c4s actually do get sued is by actually taking money under false pretense and violating their charter, which is what the DNC did. And so Jared, put it all together and took it to court. And there, a lot of people know that story, how the DNC, their attorney, Bruce Spiva, said that they can make the decision about who they want to select, in a smoke-filled room, where without our advice at all. That's basically what he said. And that blew up. Wow. And then people started seeing the DNC for what it is. So through that process, somebody was like, hey, man, you really got to talk in front of a camera. You want a radio show? So I was like, sure. So I ended up on iHeartRadio for a little bit. And then like while I was doing that, I also started a YouTube channel. And it was weird, because it was like I was just starting a YouTube channel. And I had like a very unique circumstances, because out of everybody that was on YouTube at the time, I was actually the only one with like legitimate political experience. I mean, like largely the reason that Tulsi had introduced the the Secure America's Elections Act was because of the conversation we had had about election fraud and me explaining to her how I was able to figure it out and where they were doing it during the 2016 election. And I was still like just a senior in college. And but I also had military experience too. I'm a vet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, but I also have like debate experience. Like I was, at one point one of the best debaters in the country. I was in the American Parliamentary Debate Association,
Oh,
which
wow.
ironically
That's
is actually the
amazing.
same. It was the same association that Ted Cruz was in back in the day because it was like super elitist. Well, it kind of still is, to be honest.
Yeah.
But it was like only conservatives used to be in it back in the day. It was
Mhm.
all Ivy Leagues. And so Ted Cruz, one of the reasons that he talks the way he does and he carries himself like that, he learned that in APTA. Funny enough, like a lot of them talk like that, and he just like says a bunch of stuff without saying anything at all, or rather the other way around. He says nothing at all, but he says a bunch of stuff. But he looks really good when he says it, which is why he's become so successful. So I debated all throughout high school, and I was like top 10 in the state at one point in North Carolina. And so it was like a really weird set of, with all that, given all that experience, I was also like, I had like two things that were like working against me, or three rather. I was really young for the level of knowledge that I was claiming to have on any given issue, because they didn't know who I was. They're like, we have no idea who you are. We know that you work for Bernie, but like, how the hell did we? You're saying some pretty extreme stuff. Like, are you sure that we've been funding extremist terrorist groups? Are you sure? And I'm like, I mean, yeah, I got no, we get briefed on this. I always tell people back in the day, like Osama bin Laden was a part of the Saudi Arabian royal family. It was always weird to me that he was in Pakistan and like we're allies with both of those countries. But whenever we talked about the wars in the Middle East, at least coming from the mouths of the brass at the top, we never actually mentioned Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, despite those being the countries we had the most intel with, and Osama being directly linked to them. I'm like, y'all don't think that's pretty fucking weird? I don't know. But things like that seemed pretty crazy to say back then, but I was already privy to what was going on. But my youth was kind of working against me at that time. To be quite frank, being Black and being young was working against me at that time. I mean, a lot of you probably have realized that until Revolutionary Black Network became a thing, I was like one of the only two Black people in the space that were well known, like, which is kind of ridiculous, but that's what it was. And there was almost no Black women in the space until Bree came onto the scene, like in the way she did. So, and then on top of all those things, it was like, and I like to tell the truth, and like I kind of have a weird thing about where I like literally cannot bullshit when it comes to politics. Yeah, I would have probably never been successful. A lot of people are like, oh man, you'd have been super successful. No, I do not know how to lie in politics. It's too much work, guys. It's too, you see how fucking stupid these politicians sound nowadays, man? Yeah. Because like lying is tiring. You gotta remember every lie. And then you gotta like hide out in public, because people see you like, which is not, oh man, I'm just here for the people. It's like, wow, it's crazy, because it's like definitely a Bentley outside that like you didn't have a job before you became a politician. Now you have a Bentley and your district is poor. Like, I don't see how it's your water, the water in your district is poison. Like, nobody, I don't want to deal with all that. I've suffered from the consequences of politicians who have been lying their way to the top, you know, with my personal family background, like a lot of people have. And I remember so vividly though the problems that my family had dealt with because of politicians and their decisions at the local level or at the federal level. And I just could not bear to just lie to people just for some views or for a couple of dollars. And I felt like I don't know if anybody else actually has this experience. Like, as I started listening to other people, I'm like, where the hell did they get that from? And I started figuring out, okay, so these people are worried about this. I could figure out the categories of people who to take seriously versus who is kind of full of shit versus who tells the truth most of the time, but ultimately they're probably going to be full of shit anyway. Because after you have enough experience in politics, you learn to categorize people pretty quickly.
Right.
So yeah, now we're here.